Good morning. I'm Julie Rowine. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Concord and Carlisle, and on behalf of our league, I would like to welcome you all to this latest program in our First Friday series. Our next First Friday will be on February 5th, when the topic will be the Middle School Building Committee. I'd also like to let you know about a very exciting program our league will be hosting at the end of January. On the evening of January 28th, the League of Women Voters of Concord and Carlisle will have a program featuring security expert Juliette Kayam. She will be talking to us about the security implications of disinformation and misinformation. Please visit our website at lwbcc.org for more information and for a registration link. This morning, we're going to continue the conversation that began in December about water. Our guest today is again Concord DPW Director Alan Cathcart and Alexandra Wallstrom, Concord Senior Environmental and Regulatory Coordinator. Our moderator this morning is Diane Proctor, who is our chair for the Concord Town Government Committee, the committee which organizes this series. Since our founding in 1920, the League of Women Voters has worked to foster civic engagement and to enhance access to voting. The League is a nonpartisan organization and does not support or oppose any candidate or political party. The program this morning is being recorded and will be available on our website. And I will now turn the meeting over to Diane.
Thank you, Julie. That's a very helpful introduction. Alan Cathcart and Alexandra Wallstrom are with us today to discuss a very important concern. Last First Friday, we discussed water, where it comes from, how we get it, why it is essentially the new oil in our world, because it is a scarce resource which we have to tender and care for. We are very fortunate to live where we do, but if we lived anywhere closer to the equator, we might find ourselves in peril in terms of available water. So with every drop from the faucets in our homes, we should remember just to celebrate. Now, what happens to that water? Once we use it and it heads down the drain, where does it go? And when we flush a toilet, something that makes our little 5-year-old granddaughter giggle. When we flush toilets, where does all that go? And then how is the water treated? And Alan and Alexandra are going to discuss this with us today, and we are very grateful for your presence. So Alan and Alexandra, take it away. Oh, I want to say that your microphones are all muted right now. If you have questions, as Alan and Alexandra make their presentation, please enter them in the chat box. Carl and Reed will be watching that chat box. And at the end of the presentation, which will be between about 45 minutes and 50 minutes, we will then, she will field those questions, and then we'll open up mics for people to be able to ask questions directly after those chat box questions have been posed. Okay, Alan, take it away.
Thank you, Diane, and I appreciate the invitation to come back. And partly it's because I overran the last discussion. Diane had asked that I'd cover all this material in one meeting, and as you if you were available for the first discussion, I'm fairly enthusiastic about this stuff. I enjoy it. I believe it's very, very important. With that, I think we went over a kind of an overview of the water system, and it's interesting. Even the terms we talk about water system. I'm going to get into this a little bit, where the first chapter was drinking water, and so we're starting to realize that. When we talk water systems, we're really talking more holistically. And so we're going to follow up today with more of a focus, excuse me, on wastewater and some stormwater and the treatment of those two particular components of this entire system. With that said, I'm going to go to the share screen, and hopefully our test start from the beginning. And I'm going to go back. All right. Is that the cover slide you see?
That's perfect. Yep.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to run through a lot of slides you've seen and not talk about them. And if you were here last time, it'll be a walk down memory lane, but I'm going to go very quickly. Firstly, for the new people, the Public Works is full service of town municipal services include administration activities. We have an engineering division. We have a water sewer divisions, separate enterprise funds, and that's what we're focused on today with wastewater. We have a highway grounds group who take care of a lot of the maintenance of the right-of-ways and stormwater systems. And you can see sort of this is an overview of the entire organization. I'm going to go down through memory lane, through the water system, to get us to where we left off, which was on the, here we go. So now, you might recall this slide of, why is, not just drinking water, but effective sewage treatment, so important. Again, one of the reasons that when you have ample supply of water, you always have to, you end up with water that now gets used and altered. And sometimes it's for sanitary purposes, sometimes it's for fairly clean purposes. But in essence, we have to deal with it the same way that whatever we use is going to go return to the environment. So the question is, where does that occur? And how is that processed? And what are the interests before we return it to the environment? This is an overview, if you can see up here. Can you see the pointer?
Yes.
Okay. So this insert here shows in green where the municipal sewer system is in town. And you'll notice where the green lines are, those are sewer mains. And if there's a parcel, and those are what those other, kind of gray boxes are that abut that parcel, the sewer line, more than likely, they're getting municipal sewer service. But what about all these other areas of town? What and how do they manage their wastewater? Because we provide drinking water to 95% of the community. Large percentage of towns, 65% of our residents utilize on-site private septic systems. And so people hear about it and, not everybody really understands what it is. Generally, most people might be familiar with this particular component of a septic system because it's something you might see on your yard. And it's a manhole cover in essence that gets you down into this septic box, which if you can see the whole system, your wastewater comes from your residence, flows down through pipes, through drain pipes that are separate from the drinking water pipes, goes into a septic tank, and there's treatment that starts in the septic tank. Solids get removed in the tank. So on your parcel of land or private property, you have your own wastewater, residential sanitary wastewater management system. Comes in, solids get removed, and then the liquid goes into a leaching field. And this area for a lot of private property owners takes up a fairly large area of land, and it has to be maintained. And in essence, that's where treatment occurs as well. You get solids removed, and then the microbial contaminants and nutrients get removed as it goes through a natural process. We have an organic mat that forms below this septic field that does treatment and removes certain contaminants, but then end up going and replenishing the groundwater system. And for the most, go ahead.
How much property does one need to have a septic system? Can you do this on a quarter acre, or do you need? You
can, it varies, but you have to have, the question becomes, and this is, as I said, 65% of the town have functioning, well-serving systems, but it does put constraints on redevelopment of the parcel. So there's always some allowance that you need to have. But yes, a 1/4 acre parcel could have a septic system imposed. You can get them even smaller, but then it becomes more sophisticated. But this is a fairly simple system without a lot of moving parts. And it's really important as far as your maintenance is limited primarily to the septic tank, where every few years, 3 to 5 years, you're going to want to have that pumped depending on the activity. Obviously, a single family house with 2 people functions differently than a single family house with 8 people and large family. So how often do you need to maintain your septic tank is really dependent upon your use. But wastewater is being managed. It's being managed in generally an environmentally friendly way on site. And in a community like Concord, it's important to realize when we talk about wastewater, the majority of people deal with it privately. When we put the wastewater, superimpose that on our water supply, and you may recall this slide, this shows you various sources of drinking water we have around town, that it's important when we talk about the maintenance of these systems that these have an impact on water quality, not just on the natural environment, the nearby rivers and streams, but on the drinking water systems as well. So when I talk about maintaining and what treatment we're talking about on a septic system, it's fairly simple. But what it doesn't do is any advanced treatment. And one of the challenges in education and outreach that I think we try to do in the Water Sewer Division and Public Works is ensure that people understand that no matter where you are, you don't want to put chemicals down your sink. There's certain things you can do that might be acids or bases, but if you use certain organic chemicals and things like volatile organics and that sort of thing, if you flush it down the toilet, there's a chance that it's going to go through the entire treatment system on your property and end up in groundwater. So when we talk about treatment, there's different levels of it, and people need to be mindful of education is really for the environment as well as potentially for drinking water supply for the community. And so that's where, we are interested in educating and promoting, the proper use and maintenance of septic systems, but they have their limitations. It's primarily for organics, bacteria, nitrogen, phosphorus, the nutrients that are organic. But when you get into more exotic chemicals that you might be using, or paints or paint thinner or that sort of thing, you want to keep those out of your waste stream. When we go sort of broader to the municipal systems, back when municipal systems were first developed, at the turn of the century, early 1900s, late 1800s, the purpose of the collection systems were to remove wastewater from your property in dense areas, downtown neighborhoods, and that sort of thing, just like Concord, not the more rural areas, but where water was concentrated. And Diane, to your point, they didn't have septic systems, in the downtown area. They didn't have the property to do it. Where did the wastewater go? Well, the early 1900s to the nearest river or stream. And that was by design. So in early days, it was literally dilution was the solution. It would just get put to a river stream, diluted, but most importantly, got away from your house or business. That was the purpose of, the collection systems. This is an aerial photo taken from the 1950s of this is Great Meadows in this area. This is the Concord River out here. In this little area over here is an image of the water treatment. I will say Concord was ahead of its time early in the early 1900s. Water was collected. I'll go back up to the collection system slide. Collected in the center of town, carried down to Kai's Road, which is right here. Can you, if I zoom in, the downtown area drained through gravity to Kai's Road. And on Kai's Road, if you're familiar with the planning department right now, that brick building, that was installed as originally as a sewer pumping station and electric generating station. And the reason was we had to carry the water from the concentrated downtown area, the waste stream, and pump it to fields, large sand beds that are presently the area where the existing wastewater treatment plant is located. And those sand beds were a natural filtration. And at the time, that was pretty avant-garde, where you didn't just go to the river, you actually did some natural, it was like a large septic system. And what's interesting is over time, the system expanded, but it's a little history interesting. My hero, William Wheeler, designed, he worked with a Leonard Metcalf of Metcalf and Eddy, a international engineering firm. Leonard Metcalf was a Concord resident, and one of his early designs was Concord's sewer collection system. And he worked with William to create a collection system, a pump station. There used to be, we call it the old rail, reformatory rail trail for the train. The train used to bring coal. It would power a generator that by day would pump wastewater up to the sand beds. So that was the source of power. And by evening, it would generate power for electricity for downtown lighting. So that's why if you ever go to the planning department, you'll see, how does sewer and electric, marry? Is because they shared a common power source for lighting and the sewer pumps from a common generator, multi-purpose. So it's pretty interesting back, this was at the early 1900s. So that's a little walk down memory lane. But the reason is Concord was advanced in that we were treating water better than dilution being the solution. We allowed for a large area to serve many businesses and residents to get the same kind of thing that an on-site septic system might do for a private residence. So that's kind of important.
Sure is.
This is, in the 50s, they did some enhanced treatment where they had some more process added. So it went from straight filtration, which is fairly crude, would go through the natural sand beds and then drain through groundwater to what is Great Meadows and eventually Concord River. That was the normal process. In the 50s, there was an improvement made with a secondary, sort of very crude solids management system. It was called an MHOF tank. It provided additional treatment in the 50s. And again, Concord was ahead of the time, by providing that. But really what's important is ultimately, we have to get wastewater from large area to this particular site. And I want to go to, let me see if, before I go here, I'm gonna focus a little bit on, I'll go here for next. So now we have expansions of our collection system, which couldn't all go by gravity, right? Just using the topography of the town to drain wastewater without pumps to one location. So what we had over time is the installation of a number of what we call neighborhood lift stations. So these are small pumping facilities. They're fairly simple, but you may not even know what they are when you drive by. They're not obvious, facilities, but basically you might see this is over on Laurel Street in Walden, sort of the intersection, and you'll see a control panel and you'll see a hatch. And if you go down the hatch, it opens up into a large tank, an underground tank with pumps. There is no treatment here, but it's this way of getting the wastewater from Walden Street, Laurel area to Lowell Road. So there's a series of pump stations that we have around town. And you can see here some equipment where we're maintaining them. But just so you know, when we talk about a neighborhood lift station, it's a fairly simple little station. And most people, may know in your own neighborhood, there's indications it's there, but it's not much of, it doesn't have a high profile. This facility is replaced a large cistern on Kai's Road, which was, associated with the 141 building. This is a pumping facility, and you can see it just on Kai's Road when you come into the campus. We're presently refurbishing this, but you can see inside, this is looking down several stories onto motors and piping systems that are buried underground. So above ground, you have access. You have this generator used to be inside this building, control panels inside the building, but it's a deep system with a large sump that collects wastewater from around town and then pumps it up to the wastewater treatment plant off of Bedford Street. I show you this picture here because this is a more contemporary aerial photo of what the wastewater treatment plant looks like. And basically, in the 70s, people are familiar with the Clean Water Act. And that was really when in the environmental movement and the awareness of we need to manage our water resources in a different way, not just for public health, which was primarily the main driver for a lot of the rules and regulations that we followed, but we need to be mindful of the environmental impacts. So the Clean Water Act was a primary federal law that governed water pollution. Its objective wasn't just health, it was to restore and maintain chemical, physical, biological integrity of the nation's waters. A fairly lofty goal. A lot of the regulations that we adhere to today you have the foundation in the Clean Water Act. And this is why we put a lot more attention into, what are the environmental impacts and what do we need to do above and beyond health and safety for environmental protection. So what's interesting back in the 70s when this was being bandied around down in Congress and, the federal government realized this is a huge ask. We're about to impose significant demands on communities to improve their treatment processes. The collection systems are in place. The treatment systems can be improved. And we are going to infuse state and federal money to support these improvements. So Concord, very important in the 70s, did work to find out what were its needs based on volume, how much wastewater, what size facility does it need, and what kind of treatment is required. And at the time, the needs assessment was performed, and then an ask went for financial support. And 90% of Concord's facility was paid for with state and federal grants. Wow. Not loans, grants. So, and this was across the nation, a huge investment, an infrastructure for improved environmental, benefit. What's important is when the communities determined what their needs were at the time, some were more forward thinking about future expansions. Concord actually was not interested in accommodating significant economic growth and development.
No surprise.
Well, and it's interesting because we continue to live with that decision today. And it represents some challenges as far as what to do with the budget that was established in the 70s with a different mindset when evolution occurs and now it's 40 years later. How does it feel now? Well, part of our challenges when we talk about wastewater planning are driven by that decision. But you can see this is the treatment facility that houses a lot of processes and equipment and chemicals and things that are used. These are large clarifiers and thickeners. These are just basins and chambers that allow for different levels of treatment that occur so that we can sort of treat to almost any level we're willing to pay for. The question is, what's appropriate to pay for, and does it have to be pure with nothing in it? Or can there be certain constituents in it that won't have an adverse impact on environment or health? And there's a balance. So it's really cost driven as far as cost benefit of what level of treatment is feasible and necessary. In 2007, we actually, some of you people may know that we, through the National Pollution Elimination Discharge System permitting process, that's the regulatory process that says EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and Department of Environmental Protection are in essence the arbiters of standards that we have to meet. They issue permits on cycles to communities to say you need to achieve this level of treatment at this facility. And we were on notice that we didn't have the level of treatment necessary in the early 2000s to comply with where the evolution was going with regulations. In essence, phosphorus. There's an interest to reduce phosphorus to lower levels than we could achieve with the technology we had in place. We actually piloted a innovative phosphorus reduction process called COMAG, and it was developed by Cambridge Water Technologies, a group out of MIT. We piloted this technology. We demonstrated it worked. You know, they were willing to work with us. We were able to go through a very innovative procurement process where, as part of an upgrade to the facility, we got this technology, first of its kind in the world. We partnered with them, so as they sold these units, Concord got a return on that investment. Because we're an enterprise, but not that enterprising, we could only make so much profit on this. We actually got all of the equipment paid for, over $4 million, by being, in essence, a model or pilot that they could use to demonstrate its success. So it was a really great program. We got improved water treatment. We got it at actually no cost, and we got to participate in innovation that really helped the industry advance. So it was pretty exciting project to be involved with. At this point, we go to, well, now we need to maintain this infrastructure. And when we talk about budgets and what we're doing, all the infrastructure we have, whether it's pumps, stations and facilities, wastewater treatment plants, or even the collection system itself, needs to be maintained and occasionally improved or replaced. And you can see our present worth right now is about $15.3 million of assets. And it includes that treatment plant I just showed you pictures of, 2 large scale pump stations. We call it Lowell Road, and it's one on Main Street by Assabet River. Both of those facilities are going through an upgrade to the tune of just over $2 million. We have 6 neighborhood lift stations. Those are the smaller stations that I sort of pointed out. Over 34 miles of main that's located, you know, usually in the right of way, and manholes. These are all manholes give us access to these mains so that if there's any problems, we can do repair or replace. So we now go into our what kind of maintenance is necessary? How do these systems fail? And you may be familiar with this image. This is a slide that shows sort of everything from a residence or business to private plumbing that goes from the property, goes out into a collector main that's out in the right of way under the road generally. And you can see the manhole that you would just see a cover for, but this is all buried infrastructure. And in this case, we don't have a connection between our stormwater system and wastewater system. That's a big deal. And you know, we can talk about that if we have time, but we focus on the sanitary waste, but it's old clay pipe. Some of it's plastic pipe, but it can deteriorate over time. The manholes can deteriorate over time. What happens when they deteriorate? You can have backups, or you can have groundwater infiltrating into these systems. And unfortunately, back when dilution was a solution, it didn't matter. Okay, a little more groundwater flushes the system. Well, if we're treating it at significant costs, including chemicals and process constraints on flow and size of plant, it can get pretty costly to treat clean water. And it's not economical or feasible. So we need to maintain the system more now than we did 50 years ago. Because again, that wasn't such a concern with the level of treatment, but every gallon of wastewater treated is a cost. And so we have to be mindful of that. So the question becomes, well, how do we know the condition of our system? You might see a truck, a box truck like this out in the right of way, and this might be all you see. But what's going on underground is we're using robotics and cameras technology can actually go into a manhole and do a visual inspection of a pipe. We do smoke testing that you'll hear about, where we actually go and we introduce a non-toxic smoking agent into the collection system to see where is it escaping as a indication of failed infrastructure. And this is a image of, you might see from a pipe, an old clay pipe, and you can kind of see the deterioration and cracking. And what happens is groundwater can ebb and flow, but it can leak through here, in essence, carry a lot of water that's going to be pumped at a cost and treated at a cost. So not economical. So what can we do about it? And this is really when we talk about the wastewater budget. A lot of our investments are in investigation to understand where are their needs and the repairs and rehabilitation. And so this is a situation where we're actually putting a liner. They're inserting a liner that's going to go into this pipe, and it'll create a brand new material lining of this, which will give it a useful life of another 75 years or so. And we do not have to rip up the streets. And this technology is really something that's only developed over the last 20 years. So it's a nice tool to have. We don't have to excavate or get a trench. We can insert this into the pipe, expand it, and seal the pipe, almost like new. We can also coat the insides of manholes that might be failing over time. These are brick structures in some cases. Sometimes they're concrete and weeping, but there's actually materials that can seal, almost like you might do in your basement on the wall. Similar idea to prevent water from coming in and increasing our costs. So that sort of talks about the infrastructure of our wastewater collection and treatment. Want to talk about planning the municipal. One thing people in the audience always hear about, we have these wastewater capacity constraints. Why can't we just expand? Why can't we have new businesses just connect? Why can't certain neighborhoods get sewer systems, installed? Well, in essence, in the 80s, we did a master plan. It was actually called a wastewater comprehensive plan, submitted to the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. It's a certified plan to say we have limitations of our municipal treatment facility. We need to manage it. We have a budget, and this is how we're going to manage it over the next 20 years. And this was done in the early 2000s. And this image shows the result of a lot of work. We had over 70 meetings, many neighborhood meetings to walk people through saying, should this neighborhood, if money were not an issue, should this neighborhood be served through a collection system and municipal, or is it better served on private septic systems for cost benefit? What you see is this, the gray area was the area that's already served, part of the original, existing system in 2000. And the colored areas were neighborhoods where it was warranted, where if the funds were available, it might be cost beneficial to serve these neighborhoods. But we needed to establish a plan so that we didn't react to every new ask, but we understood for feasibility and environmental protection, what was in the town's best interest. And this has been our roadmap since the early 2000s, as far as if we're to expand, where, and often to expand, the cost of expansion is borne entirely by the neighborhood through a betterment process. So it's a significant undertaking, significant costs, and it would generally require town meeting approval before we do an expansion because the costs are so great. And there'd be a betterment process in place so people could have a mechanism to finance it through the town and pay it off over a period of time. So
Alan, this is fantastic. I just want to remind us of time.
Yep.
I don't know where you are in the presentation, but we have about another maybe maybe 20 minutes for presentation, and then
Let's talk wastewater right now. This would be a good time to talk wastewater. I'm gonna now blend into stormwater, but I think we can do that in a different section. So let's talk the wastewater, so people can have a chance to ask questions if they have any.
No, we'd rather do the whole presentation.
Okay, all right.
And then
I'll go
ask
through.
questions. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Do I have 20 minutes for presentation
Got
or?
20 minutes. Yep, that's about
Okay.
right.
This will be easy. I'm going to be less than that. So let's now go to, I talked about drinking water. We just talked about wastewater, at least through sanitary waste. We're now going to talk about other water. And this is the next generation of Concord where I'm pretty excited we will go. And we've started this process in-house. With a water cycle, rain, streams, ponds, groundwater, those are the source of water. And so we use it for drinking water purposes. We abuse it and we create wastewater. And some of the abuse is through, home use and commercial use, different processes. But then we have to return it back to the environment. And that's the wastewater treatment that we talked about. What about stormwater? Stormwater is a huge component and really the next frontier of, I think of stormwater kind of like they thought of wastewater or sanitary wastewater over 100 years ago. Right now, dilution is a solution when we have an impact on the stormwater. How do we have an impact on the stormwater? Every property, all, what do we call it? Impervious cover, whether it's pavement, whether it's roofing, whether it's whatever's impervious we have, we're changing and altering the temperature and chemistry of natural rain. By changing that nature, it's having an environmental impact. And so now part of the Clean Water Act, which was more holistic, it wasn't just sanitary waste, was what about the rivers and streams? Do we need to pay more attention to stormwater systems so that we can manage them better? So there is an initiative, a program called the MS4. In essence, we are starting to get regulated, each community, with stormwater systems. And stormwater is simply the catch basins that collect water, from the streets, from the drains that then discharge to a pipe. Well, if you go back to, I'm going to take the extreme case. This is a combination. This could be stormwater only, it could be wastewater, but in essence, people are saying we need to be dealing with the waste stream from stormwater. And yes, it doesn't have the same contaminants and same, challenges of sanitary waste, but there's things in it. There's things it's picking up. Its sediment is in it. How is that affecting the environment? So we are now looking at a new regulatory framework that the town needs to respond to. And we're not alone. A lot of communities are starting to look at their stormwater systems so they can be managed in a way that's a little bit more protective of the environment, as well as protective of the community when we see changes in climate, more extreme precipitation and flooding, droughts. So we have this extreme weather that we're now challenged with the design of what does a stormwater system look like today? What should it look like? Well, we're using different tools today, and you'll hear us talk about various roads programs where we might be looking at these rain gardens where we're trying to treat water that would otherwise go through a pipe to a stream. But two things happen when you recharge the ground. You provide some sort of treatment, especially when sediments and sort of organics that might be carried with it. You recharge the groundwater, which is good, and you reduce they call it flashiness of a river or stream, how fast it flows or low flow. By recharging groundwater, you stabilize that flow because the streams are fed by groundwater primarily. You get flash events from stormwater enter, but when it's not raining or snowmelt, we know rivers and streams still flow. They're fed by groundwater systems. And so if you maintain the groundwater, becomes a baffle of extreme flow. So there's a benefit of where you can take stormwater and not have it go directly to the stream untreated, but have it enter the groundwater where it can. And that's based on the hydrogeology and sands and gravels and things, but where you can, put it back to the ground where it can have some treatment. And as far as the real issue with stormwater is temperature. It can be modulated where you can not have warm water, sort of entering a cool, a brook, for instance. So it has two purposes when you talk about stormwater management. The issue with stormwater management is it's kind of the orphan in the water resource universe. You're going to hear more and more about systems and communities like Concord looking at a utility. We need to invest money to create the infrastructure, to create the treatment, to do the things that the community needs to do to protect the environment. And these things are generally not on our radar as far as budget planning and funding. And so when we do a roads program, we have money for replacing existing storm systems, but some of these improvements are above and beyond anything that we've been doing historically. In Concord, we've started to do these. We're promoting these. We look at opportunities where we can get these sorts of treatment systems in place, but we're also working with the planning department on low impact design and construction, on new subdivisions and that sort of thing. This is all part of the town's stormwater regulation. So it's on our radar. We're in the infancy of really understanding how to manage it, but there's going to be a lot of opportunity and needs where we want to start, sort of focusing our energy on this. And it takes us to the next slide, which is really sort of the culmination of everything I love about water into one slide. And basically, it's to look at more sustainable principles when we're talking about drinking water, wastewater, stormwater. Start looking at them holistically. And the challenge we have, and we're going to need support to do this, historically, each one of these silos, stormwater, potable water, wastewater, have been managed and regulated differently in different silos. That's not an efficient way to do it when they all have an interplay. As I've talked about, the wastewater on the drinking water extractions that have impacts on rivers and streams, and the stormwater, which is either recharging groundwater that could be drinking water or modulate the impact on the rivers and streams. All those things matter. And if we could do this in a way that was responsible, we do it in a holistic manner. So as part of the Concord's long-range plan and part of our sustainability principles, Concord has identified an interest in pursuing integrated water resource management. It's new, it's a challenge. We've literally just gone out for a request for qualifications to get a consultant on board to help us start navigating the challenges here, educating the community as to what we should be looking at, and how do we effectively inform the regulators where we want to spend Concord's money. And I'm going to go back to the Clean Water Act. When it was first established, everyone was behind it with funds, state and federal money. 90% of the funds came for infrastructure improvements. Today, we are lucky if we're talking low interest loans. That's the best we're going to get. So really the burden of all the new asks, which are all great, but they're all on the burden of the community. And how do we manage that? And so my interest is to work with the community to better understand. And the good news is, when I talked about public works, we talk about the engineering division, they do the capital improvements in the right of way. The highway grounds does the maintenance. They do the street cleaning. They clean the catch basins. They unplug the storm drains. The water sewer crew deal with the drinking water production facilities. They deal with the wastewater collection and pumping facilities. So the good news is, I'm pleased all of these things fall within the realm of public works. we can actually impact these. We need to be in the center of this, but at the same time, this is for community interests and values and needs. And that's what I'm excited as we start launching this integrated plan. We're going to be looking for stakeholders to participate in this because, as I tell everybody, this is your system. And we want to respond to what the community wants. And we always say, you know, in public works, we can design and construct anything you're willing to pay for. But the job is to educate you to say what and where is the value and how do you help us achieve your goals? So that's basically the overview.
Thank you so much. As Alexandra, are you going to add to this discourse or how does this, Alan, this is so interesting and so helpful. I know we're all learning. And there are also some fabulous questions on our chat box. Alexandra, are you going to add to this or what role are you going to play next?
My role is to help answer any questions that may relate to drinking water questions and those types of things. So I'm here to support Alan in fielding the questions.
That's terrific. And I know there's some terrific questions. So let's start by turning to Carlin. Carlin, can you begin to field some of the very thoughtful questions that people are asking?
Sure, Diane. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, should I stop the share? Would that be helpful? Or
Oh, that's probably a good idea.
okay, yeah.
Thank you, Alan. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so far we have 10 questions, so I'm just going to take them from the top towards the beginning of the presentation. The current plans, do the current plans or are there current plans for a septic treatment plant on the W.R. Graceland? And how long can we put off a new treatment plant and at what cost?
Okay, great question. So when we went through that comprehensive planning activity back in 2000s, we identified the constraint, its volume. How much can we treat the existing facility? And so what we have right now is a permit for, I'm going to use some numbers, but 1.2 million gallons a day, average day, that can get processed through that facility. We believe that we can allow for modest inflow, or infiltration of the, what would be the right way? No, it's not infill, excuse me, infill. This would be where we have the existing sewer system. Some new connections can occur, but they have to be managed very carefully. But we have some freeboard to accommodate that. When we looked at the whole town's needs long range, we said we probably have somewhere to the tune of about 1.6 million gallons based on assumptions made in 2000 of needs if we were to realize expansion of the collection system. If we were to find economic ways to bring sewer out to some neighborhoods so we could get them off septic systems, we could see up to about 1.6 million. So that's 400,000 gallons more than what we can treat at the facility right now. So we looked at some alternatives, and early on, it's kind of interesting. The first evaluation of the that land over the Grace site was done through Public Works for wastewater. In fact, I'll give Ian Gillespie credit, a resident of Concord, who also does development, pointed that land out to me as knowing the challenge of wastewater, say, that might be an opportunity to look at. So we got a grant from DEP to look at that site. The sands and gravels out there are incredible. And we identified a potential future use of up to about 450,000 gallons that could potentially be treated and discharged as groundwater discharge to that site. So early on, that was what got Concord's interest peaked. Then it proceeded with other sort of interests, including the light plant and school busing and all that. But we actually, the sewer fund contributed funds to reserve that potential right to develop that as a groundwater discharge site. And that is one of our relief valves for treatment. If and when we decide expansion is necessary and feasible, that would be a part of the process. But it's just it's much like we have Balls Hill for future water supply. It's on reserve, and it's a good thing to have because you never know whether it's 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, when the return on that investment is made. We don't know, but it's a long-term investment and play. So that site, yes, if you hear about wastewater, that's the reason, but it's very conceptual. And to realize that, we'd have to be looking at significant expansion of our collection system in West Concord. We'd have to do a lot on pumping and collection system improvements to make that happen. But it is on our radar for that very reason, but very long range planning.
Thank you. Carla?
Okay, next batch. I'm going to combine these two. Can the Concord Public Works send information to homeowners who have septic systems? And what should we do when we see a problem with a storm drain?
Okay. So information is something we're getting better at in Public Works. I think we do and have provided information to people through Alex. You can probably tell the group better than I can as far as some of the vehicles. Alex has been very involved with our demand management, water conservation, and water quality side. Alex, speak to some of the venues we do use or maybe have used that you're aware of, and what we might expand it to.
So I would say some kind of common vehicles that we use for disseminating information. One would be the annual water quality report. And so this might be a good reminder for me to use septic systems and wastewater as a feature in an upcoming report that we tend to have kind of informational outreach in that report each year to kind of give people things like conservation tips or updates on plans or projects that we have kind of throughout town. In the past, we have also kind of done direct mailings. We used to do them more so, we always kind of remind people if they call with questions about disposal. We always kind of try to plug Melissa's drop off, swap off, and unwanted medication, hazardous waste collection programs, and the website, of course, which for the sewer, we could probably do a little bit more updating, and maybe, I don't know that we have a ton of resources available for septic related things, but the website is one of our easiest ways to provide information to residents and businesses and those types of things. So I'd say those are kind of the main avenues that we use.
And so if someone has a problem or notices a problem, they should call?
Yeah. So on the septic systems, when they're dealing with the quality issues, the board of they're managed through the Board of Health. So they should contact the Board of Health with any operational issues they have with the septic system. And the Board of Health can also explain what they do and how they function and the treatment involved. If they were to contact Water Sewer Division about the quality issues, I'm sure Alex would probably answer the same question. But if they wanted to get into the mechanics and how their system operated, she would then pass them to Board of Health for direction and guidance on that.
Yeah, Marge Daggett, do you want to build on that question?
No, I want to ask a question about, it sounds from what you said that there was a decision made in the 80s to basically constrain the size of the town because of the constraints on the water and the sewer systems. I mean, I can't help but ask, but the cost benefit is whose benefit? As maybe there should be a rethinking of that benefit.
Sure.
For example, there are goals that Concord has set now for affordable housing. What can the sewer and water department do, or is it up to the selectmen to do something in order to alleviate some of these constrictions?
Okay, good question. So,
Question. Thank you,
yeah.
Mark.
So I would go back to, it wasn't just the 80s, it was the 70s when the first decision townwide was to design a facility for 1.2 million gallons a day. That was the beginning of the plan. In the 80s, actually in 2000, is when we revisited the capacity and we said cost benefit, what do we want? And this was, there were, I think it was close to 70 meetings we had on wastewater. And there was a task force that included representation from the Select Board, Natural Resource Commission, Board of Health, Public Works. There are probably some other entities who were part of this stakeholder group to develop a plan that met Concord's interest, right? This wouldn't have been a Public Works decision. This was a big decision for the town. At the time, the interest was, we want it to be growth neutral. That was very public and very deliberate. And as an engineering side of it, okay, if it's growth neutral, we're going to work with 1.2 million gallons a day. Then in the mid 2000s, there were planning decisions made to look at trying to attract and invest in affordable housing and planned, I forget, it was a planned residential PP, someone on the audience might know.
PRD?
No, not the PRD. It was another planning interest which said, hey, by the way, we're rethinking the planning assumptions and we don't think we want it to be growth neutral. Well, that was a change in the around 2005 timetable. So we reevaluated the wastewater constraint and we did make some modifications, say we will accommodate some infill, but it's got to be done in a very managed way. So when people come for new connections or change in use to increase their demand on the system, they go before the Public Works Commission and they will review that proposal to determine if we have the capacity, first of all, that we haven't exceeded our permit. If we exceed our permit, it's not the town's decision. We would have a moratorium. So everything we do is to maintain choice. But if we have the capacity and this project can demonstrate that it's in the town's best interest, and for instance, an example of that be VOA did an expansion a few years ago, and that was accommodated.
VOA is, Alan?
Was that Volunteers of America?
Okay.
So larger projects, Brookside Village, for instance, was in West Concord. These are sorts of projects that merit deliberation from the Public Works Commission to provide that capacity to say, yes, if you have the support of all the town's interests and you can meet the long range plans and all that, and we have the capacity, will allow you to come on board. But with a caveat, we are now doing it at some risk that we may exceed a federal permit. And we know that. But we're going, a lot of communities wait to exceed a federal permit before they even plan. We try to plan before we exceed the permit. But at this point, we're willing to take that risk. And we've looked at relief valves of if we exceed that permit, what would we then do? We've identified enhanced treatment at the existing wastewater treatment plant to the tune of about 155,000 gallons a day that we could potentially expand if we got permission from EPA and DEP, use the same site, improve the treatment, and increase capacity. That would be something we'd have to negotiate. Or if it really was extreme, we could look at something like the Grace property and look at that as the infrastructure that would accommodate some of this interest from the town for economic growth and development. I will share with you, there is equal interest on accommodating economic growth and development, affordable housing, and not seeing any change in Concord. So that's the balancing act that's forever, discussed. So it's a great question, and that's kind of what those are the relief valves we're looking at. We actually have a request into EPA as we speak on a draft permit to allow us to increase our capacity by 10%. And we believe they should be able to allow the town of Concord to do this. The question becomes, will they? So we're taking all the steps we can through the regulatory process to try and look at Concord's best interest. But I think your question on how does growth occur? It has occurred. And we've been actually managing a very tight budget since 2000, when we were first on notice that we were starting to get close to our permit limits. And so the management that we had has allowed us to accommodate some of that economic growth and development. And the investment that we made into the infrastructure, including removing infiltration and inflow, where we spend that money for the maintenance, is preserving some of that ability to expand.
Does this permit come from the EPA?
It does. It's a joint permit in Massachusetts with both EPA and DEP, which is highly unusual. We're only one of 3 states in the country that have a joint permit, and it makes it very complicated, unfortunately. But in any event, it is EPA and DEP both issue a permit to town.
Thank you.
If Concord had joined the MWRA, would we be in this situation now?
We have no potential connection to MWRA. We wouldn't even have the option.
Wait. MWRA, for those who are.
Mass Water Resources Authority. They provide the metropolitan area of Boston with water and wastewater service.
Thank you. So now could we restate the question, Marge? If we had joined the MWRA, what?
Yes, was there any reason why why Concord could not have joined the MWRA?
Yes. First, they're outside, we're outside their service area. We couldn't connect to their pipes. There's no way to connect.
Okay. Thank you.
That's a good response. Now I'm going to go back to Carlin. I see some hands, but I want to go back to Carlin's questions because they came up first. And so Carlin, next question. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Diane. This will be a bundle of questions dealing with water contaminants. Concerns about using organic lawn fertilizer. Is it any better for storm runoff than regular fertilizer? Along with that, does it matter the amount of the fertilizer or the slope of the runoff? So lawn fertilizer is one. Second one I have is about the concerns about understanding water contaminants like drug residue when you're putting medications down the sink and such. And the third water contaminant question concerns PFAS and the threat to their health. And I hope you will define what PFAS is. Thanks.
Yeah, another acronym. Okay.
So when we zoom back out to all of the water resources that we have in town, there's different impacts and changes and alteration of, where do we get these, where do the contaminants come from? So the first question is on lawn care maintenance and fertilizers and what you use on the yard. Well, what you use on the yard is intended to enhance growth of, your lawn, your yard, organic growth. That same material in a river or stream is also going to enhance growth and nutrients that are not advantageous. We don't want to see scum in these areas where you want to see green grass on your property. It's a challenge. And in fact, with how people maintain and their lawns is a real opportunity in Concord on many different fronts. One on water demand. If we could sort of optimize maintenance so they didn't use too much water, it would help us all on our costs of water service as well as availability of our supply, which is constraints. But the nutrients that get washed from the yard, if you're over fertilizing, it is going to wash off the yard and into a river or stream or catch basin and cause eutrophication of a nearby pond or water body. So there's need for being more mindful about how we're maintaining our yards. That's part of the who can do that, who should provide that education. I'm hoping something like this integrated water resource management strategy will provide another venue where we can enhance education and awareness so people understand that. But so the question on yard care, it varies everything from organic, which means it's going to have phosphorus and nitrogen and various additives. Those are problematic in the environment because they allow for growth of organic and algae when it's in the river and stream and not managed. So that's education, and yes, there's opportunities. The other one was so that's the first, yard waste. The second was
drug contaminants, and the third one was PFAS.
I'm sorry, Carla, what was the second one?
It was drug contaminants.
Oh, drug
and
contaminants, okay. So
PFAS.
drug
Yep.
contaminants, also another serious issue. Drugs, pharmaceuticals, personal care products are all kind of the same bundle of chemistry that is not natural. And if it's not natural, then your septic system or municipal system are going to be challenged with, they're not designed to treat those sorts of things. The municipal wastewater system can be modified and does treat some of it. Septic systems, less. So when you add something, we do have pharmaceutical collection programs in town that one is you can bring these materials to, I believe, the Concord Police Department. I hope I have that right.
No, I'd understood. Oh, Julie, you seem to know.
Okay.
I believe they have modified that. I think they're not collecting anymore, but we should confirm before we spread information about it, because I think I heard the chief say that they had taken down the drug collection box.
Melissa Simoncini, I don't know, she just joined us. Melissa's been involved with the, it's part of our waste management, and it's not, wastewater per se, but Melissa Simoncini is our solid waste recycling coordinator. Do you happen to know on this case?
Yeah, I'll confirm with the chief. I'm unsure. Last time I knew it was still functional and people just had to ask to be let into the lobby. It wasn't necessarily open 24/7. But I'll circle back and provide some type of information and update if needed.
So, and we also used to collect it.
That up to 3 weeks ago, they were collecting drugs from members of our community who just weighed in, and
Okay.
so I think it's probably, I mean, I was certainly told that the place to take them was to the police department. It may be that during COVID things are less, what is normal during COVID?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Diane, I actually had, when I was the one who asked the pharmaceutical question, and although drugs that we have to dispose of is one problem, the more difficult problem, of course, is that when we take them, we excrete them, and they end up in the wastewater stream that way. And that was more of what I was interested in on this topic.
Okay.
That's really a good refinement.
Yeah. And
Julie.
it relates to the personal care products as well. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where, when we have to look at all of the products we use in a day, and you literally have to look at what is the fate and transport of that product. And if you're using makeups and things that they have these micro beads, plastics in them.
Wow.
Again,
Yeah.
these things get washed and disposed. And the challenge is what happens to them. And we continue to look with more scrutiny at products and how they're entering the environment. And our old systems are not necessarily designed to mitigate or manage those. So the question is very, it's a good, challenge, I think, to society when we are taking medications or using personal care products and we wash them from ourselves. They will go either into the septic system, and are they going to be removed there? Not necessarily. And everything behaves differently. So I got to be careful that, we're just saying these are not the normal kind of waste that systems were designed or even understood to design them to remove. So that's something which is increasing, awareness and understanding is happening sort of literally over the last 10, 20 years, where we've started to hear about this is becoming an issue. So how quickly can we respond as a society to it? I think a lot of people say, are we removing it after the use, or should we be doing something before it's produced and then distributed widespread? And that's a real challenge for society.
It certainly is.
So
And
that's on the personal care products and drugs. So being mindful of what you do put down, the what is disposed of, we will likely get regulations that are going to be imposed fairly strictly at the municipal wastewater treatment plant because it's centralized and we can change treatment processes for a cost, but we can do that. So there's an advantage when you have a centralized system where you have a point of discharge that can be managed in a way that is, now we have 33% of the town is going to spend the money to do the process improvements like we did with phosphorus to take care of the next level of treatment as necessary. Septic system, you don't have that same option, but there may be a time where they get enhancements on those systems that allow for treatment. I don't know. We're not there at this point. I'm going to jump to the PFAS issue, and that is the next, sort of great debate on a new contaminant of interest, and it's a universal product. It's used in, Alex, why don't I let you speak to the PFAS? I'm going to get the acronyms wrong and whatnot, but can you speak to PFAS at least on kind of the standards and what we know on the drinking water side, but also it's going to translate what Alex talked about on the drinking water side to wastewater as well. It hasn't quite hit yet, but it will. So Alex, can you talk a little bit about PFAS?
So what PFAS actually stands for is per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. And so they believe upwards of maybe 5,000 different variants of PFAS chemicals. Some more commonly used, some of the, what's currently kind of most focused on is the longer chain versions of PFAS. So a lot of those products had been used first by places like 3M or Chemours, and a lot of those things have been phased out and they've been kind of replaced with shorter chain molecules that they think, oh, maybe these will be better for the environment. But kind of in essence, there's been lots of focus on the kind of class of chemicals over the last, I'd say probably 10 years or so. And so in Concord, we did some testing as part of what's called the UCMR program, or the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, which is a program through EPA. So we tested as part of that program and we didn't find any PFAS in any of our water supplies at that time. Kind of since then, there's been lots of changes, and because there's been kind of no federal consensus through the EPA on kind of setting a standard, each state has taken their own approach. And Massachusetts back in October kind of set a final rule. They picked 6 of kind of the common, most known about PFAS contaminants and grouped them together and set a standard in Massachusetts of 20 parts per million.
Alex,
And-
can you tell us where we might find a PFAS? I mean, if I'm living in not on a farm, but I'm just living in a regular household, what product in my home might contribute to this PFAS?
You might find PFAS in your nonstick cookware. You might find PFAS in your Gore-Tex rain gear. You might find it in your makeup products. You might find it in your carpet or stain-resistant furniture. So it's used basically to repel water and oil. You may find it in your food packaging, like most of people think of popcorn bags or pizza boxes, things where you don't want basically water to deteriorate the material. So it's pretty commonly found in all facets of our lives. And so DEP set the standard back in October, and they've kind of rolled out testing requirements based on the size of your population served. So we will be part of the second group of people that are starting sampling in the second quarter of this year. So we'll be doing some more sampling at that time. And we're looking to EPA and DEP for guidance on appropriate sampling techniques, appropriate labs that have been certified and double checked, because there's lots of, they're still kind of developing the techniques and everything's changing. So we want to make sure we're doing our testing and reporting in a responsible manner with the best available information and not providing kind of information that's maybe questionable. So we're kind of trying to do our diligence and stay in contact with the regulatory agencies to provide the best information we can.
That's fantastic. And as you learn more, I know we all hope that that information will be communicated to our community in as broad a way as we can, because these are things that people can individually, try to affect in the way they manage their lives. Carlin, next set of questions.
Right, I've got 2 questions that focus on I call it sustainability. I'll tell you the two questions. First one, will the Concord Public Works Department be in charge of the water quality work at White Pond and Warner's Pond? And the second question is, how can protecting trees and wetlands help mitigate extreme stormwater events? So White Pond, Warner's Pond, and trees, stormwater events.
Okay, great. So as far as the White Pond, Warner's Pond, we would be peripherally involved just because I know the White Pond is administered through the town manager's office.
Right.
I think people are familiar with the fact that the town was gifted a beach, and I know there's been, you know, a great history on the community interests of what White Pond, you know, kind of brings, and as well as Warner's Pond, you know, sort of value to not just the immediate abutters, but the entire community. So there's always been an interest in both of those resources. Both are administered through the town manager's office. Kate Hodges is the assistant town manager or deputy town manager, and she's been taking a lead on both infrastructure that allows for access to these ponds and use of these ponds, as well as working closely, I know, with the Natural Resource Commission on the quality. I know there's been conversations about potential dredging of Warner's Pond. I know with White Pond, they both have challenges as far as water quality and protection. White Pond is a classic old, almost you know, camp area that, you know, very small parcels, lots of density, with expanded use over the years. And in fact, we identified back in 2000 when we did the comprehensive wastewater master plan, there was a need based on just the septic systems alone that they would be best served with a neighborhood, or what you call package treatment facility, a small facility that was not something which was received well at the time. The science told us that, but I think the neighborhood interest, there was real concerns about, you know, the costs associated with that and the impact. Whether that's revisited or not might be an issue in the future. And stormwater management is also an opportunity over there that I know the town will be looking at. But one of the challenges with White Pond is most of the property is abutted by private, you know, residential use, as well as private ways, which also introduce another challenge of how much the town can actually do. So that's on the White Pond. And then Warner's is more of one of the big challenges I know with Warner's is it's right off of Route 2.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stormwater and what happens on Route 2 has to be considered. But I think primarily if there's questions, Kate Hodges, the town manager's office, would be a good place to go as far as that. Will it be part of the universal integrated plan? I would hope it would be, because it's another part of the town's resources.
It's complicated, isn't it, Alan?
Oh,
Because
very much so.
also White Pond is called White's Pond sometimes by people in Sudbury, you know, who see it as part of their town. I mean, you know, I mean, and Warner's is a constant flow, and so we're kind of downstream from lots and lots of things that flow right through us.
Yep.
And so I know that these issues are complicated, aren't they? Carlin.
Okay, the second part of the question, it was about how can protecting trees and wetlands help mitigate the stormwater events. And then there's one more I want to be sure that we get to is, are we doing any testing of wastewater for COVID-19? Okay, so trees and COVID-19.
Okay, so the trees will be part of our integrated water resource management plan. The reason trees are important, and it's kind of interesting, I will share, you know, a concept, and it's funny, any science has to be, you got to be careful how it's used or abused. On one hand, trees provide a great buffer and of stormwater to recharge and replenish, and, you know, sort of stabilizing lands. They also, you know, so emit, they absorb a lot of CO2. So there's some environmental benefits, you know, to the trees, and the shading and that sort of thing provides sort of benefits as far as temperatures and that sort of thing. the same time, trees are responsible for a lot of uptake of, evapotranspiration. So that's the process where they're actually taking groundwater and utilizing as part of their process and depleting groundwater from it. So it's a funny balance of, on one hand, they're an important part of the ecosystem. I think Concord has an interest, and it's identified in its long-range planning to see more trees in the right places. There's the balance as far as private lands versus public lands. Obviously public, a lot of the public lands are in the right of ways, and a lot of the right of ways have the same infrastructure I talked about with the drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, electric, underground electric, gas. So those corridors are challenging to find places where roots won't become problematic. And, so that's we do have a program. The tree warden works, he's Aaron McCloskey is the town tree warden. He's the highway ground superintendent. He's very attuned to the interest as far as we got a grant for planting trees. He's involved with right-of-way plantings and working with private property interests who want trees that are planted in or near the right-of-way, and see if we can accommodate those through the grant. He's been working with a bunch of committees and groups on a tree brochure that we're going to be issuing through Public Works very shortly to try and help people understand the best kinds of trees for the best locations and the species that work best in this environment. So that's going to be forthcoming fairly soon, and we're hoping to launch that, very soon. So trees will be a big part of the integrated plan because they do have an impact on quality and quantity, as well as they fit within the realm of public works interests, especially shade trees and the right of way, but also working with the NRC and other groups on private properties too. So trees are important and will be part of the plan. And then finally, Carlin, you mentioned
It was COVID-19 testing in our wastewater.
All right, so COVID-19, so it's a great question, and we were aware of this BioBot technology. They're a local, company that early in COVID developed a technique to trace or look at wastewater streams and determine based on a sample, correcting a grab sample, a relative concentration that would then relate more macroscopically to the nation as far as frequency or incidence of COVID. And early on, Concord decided we might want to participate. So we did actually talk to the company. We actually grabbed a sample. It was, I can't remember when the date was, but it was well into, kind of the early mid-spring. And we got results back that were a little disappointing, and it was not inexpensive testing to perform. When I say disappointing, we were sort of undetectable. I mean, low, and we knew we had incidents in Concord. We also knew we had the Emerson Hospital and various facilities, nursing care facilities around town. And it just didn't make a lot of sense to us. And then at the same time, we were concerned that, well, what does the information, how does it inform Concordians if we're getting a lot of detects from Emerson Hospital? So we basically looked at it and say, we're not sure this program really benefits Concord and is going to give us information that's going to be particularly helpful at the cost. And we're talking thousands of dollars a sample. In order to make this work, you'd be doing that weekly to try and track and use it. There was even a question up front as far as, was it, a tail of the dog, or did it, tell you information too late? So we did a sample, we looked at it, and we said, we're not sure it's really got a cost benefit for Concord. I can tell you regionally, it's been effective for someone like MWRA, which is doing large, areas of the Commonwealth. They have been able to get some interesting information, and then collectively that goes with other large systems that might be doing it. So nationally, it's been a great program for some, tracer of the incidence of COVID. For Concord, that's our history and story as to why we didn't continue it. But,
Is the prison system, Alan, on our sewer system?
excuse me?
Is the correctional institution
No, that's a good question.
on our public sewer system?
No, MCI, the Mass Correctional Institute on the Rotary, has its own wastewater treatment system. They
Okay,
have a small system that serves them exclusively.
okay, that's a helpful ingredient to remove from that.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, from that sampling question, given what's been going on. Carlin, is there another question? I want to note that Janet Rothrock has suggested that people watch the movie Dark Waters
Hmm.
to know more about PFAS, PFAS, or however one
PFAS,
says
yeah.
PFAS. So Janet, thank you for that suggestion very much. Carlin, other questions? If not, I'm going to turn to Tanya, who has a question.
Well, I just want to know, we've got 4 other questions here, but I suspect there might be some contact information where people who have questions could send it to Alan or to Alexandra.
Mhm.
So
That would be very helpful.
yeah.
Go ahead, because we have about 3 minutes left, and we want to be sure to, can you summarize those questions for us so we know what, is it possible to do that?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you what the questions are, and then if you, perhaps we should get Tanya's question as well. Okay. 1, what security measures are in place, physical security measures are in place to protect the wastewater plant? Number 2, how many homes still have cesspools? Number 3, what needs to change so that gray water can recharge groundwater? And number 4, what kind of water filters are good? So that's what I have so far.
Okay. On very quickly on the oh wait, I'm sorry. I just which one? The
Water filters,
that's the last one. What's the second to last? That was a quick
gray
one.
water.
Gray water is a plumbing code issue in Massachusetts. I have served on some committees to advocate for a change in plumbing code, but it's that's where we'd have to affect change legislation to change the plumbing code. But that is something which we are, water suppliers are interested in, as well as wastewater. There are models out in California, Georgia, Arizona that we could look at, but that's an opportunity, but doesn't exist yet in so much for Mass. What was another one, Carlin?
What kind of water filters are good?
It varies depending on your specific need. I often tell people it's challenging to put a filter in your home because it's challenging to put a filter at a water production facility which has uniform flow and quality. It's a very complex process. When you bring it to your house, your flow and quality varies a lot. And so there's standard filtration, but if I would talk to Alexandra offline on that, she can kind of direct you on that.
Terrific.
Okay.
Thank you. It was also noted that these micro particles are also often found in toothpastes. So that if you're looking around for a toothpaste that doesn't have those but still cleans your teeth, that's another factor.
Carlin, there were 2 other questions I could answer quickly. I knew it, but I can't remember. Yeah.
Okay, one of them was how many homes still have cesspools?
Okay, I would direct that question to the Board of Health because I wouldn't, Public Works wouldn't know it unless you were a sewer on a collection system. So 65% aren't, I can't answer that, but Board of Health might be able to help you with that.
That's
Yes.
terrific. And there was one more, Carlin.
The last one was about what physical security measures are being taken to protect the wastewater treatment plant.
Brutus and Tanya.
Okay.
No.
I want to explain that a bit.
No, it's the, all our facilities are different levels of protection. And I wouldn't go into the details of that, publicly.
Right.
But, we are mindful of, sort of security issues and interests of our assets, both drinking water and wastewater.
Alan, I'm so sorry that it's 11 o'clock because and Alex, the information has been so good. Clearly, we have so much to learn and a very strong program to support in the town. And whatever we can do to help forward the information that you are providing to our community is terrific. With additional questions or commentary, I hope people will send those directly to Alan or send them to me, and I can forward them to Alan, and then we can disseminate them in Monday Member News or in some other vehicle here that the league has in order to help people. Tanya, I see your hand, and I know we're over time. Do you have a very quick comment or question?
Yes, thank you. It's to follow up the comment that Marjorie made about affordable housing. I just want to say that the long-range plan, of course, supports affordable housing. However, they did not say they also support growth, and it is important to preserve nature. Therefore, affordable housing, to make affordable housing available need not mean encouraging growth in any way. I just wanted to throw that into the discussion. And one more quick point is about when people in White Pond worry about their environment. We don't live near White Pond at all. We don't even visit it all that much, but we also care about the environment. So those environmental issues are not necessarily butter issues all the time, and we should keep that in mind in town discussions. And thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. Very informative. Thank you, everyone.
You guys are terrific. And I know the work you do is virtually invisible in some ways, and yet it's absolutely fundamental to the health of our community. And thank you for everything you do so very, very much.
Right.
Yay!
Thank you all. And we appreciate the support and your interest. It is important, so stay tuned on the integrated water resource management activities. I think you'll find it of interest. And again, Alex, Melissa, I got a great staff. So if I don't have the answer, I generally direct you to the subject matter expert. So I know I'm learning more about a little bit about a lot, but we have depth, so I can get you there if you need it.
We're learning a whole lot about about many things, and thank you so very much. Just a reminder that the next First Friday, we hope will be on the middle school building project, and that should be very helpful for our community in terms of understanding the future in terms of educational output. Well, 2 future programs, one on the open meeting law and one from Melissa. Hello, Melissa. One from Melissa on recycling and just in general, how we manage not our liquid waste, but our tangible wastes. So thank you all very much, and have a wonderful weekend. Bye.
Okay. All right. Thank you.